country. You're about to enter Scarborough country. No passport required. No PC police allowed.
Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
These are good days in the history of freedom.
Hey, welcome to Scarborough country. I'm Joe Scarborough. Hope you're having a great Monday night. Now, we're hearing reports once again that our troops are being mistreated. Why am I not surprised? It's time for the real deal. A UPI report has just come out this past week that's shown that many of our troops in Fort Stewart are living in squalor, that they're not getting the medical treatment they care that they deserve, that they're living in substandard conditions. In fact, one citizen soldier told a reporter that he felt like a third-class citizen. Why am I not surprised? Well, because we at Scarborough country have been documenting for months now about how everybody loves to salute our soldiers and our sailors going overseas, but when it's time to pay the bill to take care of them, the way the heroes deserve to be taken care of, nobody's around to write the check. So what's happening with our citizen soldiers? Why are they living in such poor conditions? Well, we don't need a reporter to tell us why. Let's just look back at the past 10 years. And we can start with the Bill Clinton administration, where Bill Clinton actually bragged about cutting 200,000 federal employees. You know what? The majority of those cuts were all in the military. So that put more of a pressure on our citizen soldiers who were reservists and who were National Guardsmen. A lot of Republicans were thinking, gee, it's going to be great when George W. Bush gets into the White House. But once they got into the White House, what did Don Rumsfeld start talking about doing? Keeping the size of our military low and depending more and more on our reservists. But you know, in the 21st century, with America being the lone superpower, with us facing a war on terror, we just can't afford to do that. Ronald Reagan once said that America was to be like a city shining brightly on the hill for all the world to see. You know it, and I know it, that the people that light that flame and allow us to be that city shining brightly on the hill are our men and women in uniform. Unless Congress and our president step forward and do what it takes, that light will soon be extinguished. And that's tonight's Real Deal. Right now, we want to bring in Mark Benjamin. He's the UPI reporter who broke this very important story, and he's with us right now. Mark, thanks for being with us. Give us an idea of just how bad the conditions were for injured troops at Fort Stewart.
Well, the conditions are pretty tough, Joe. There are approximately 600 soldiers at Fort Stewart in what they call medical hold. That means they're too sick to be soldiers anymore. About 40% of those soldiers went and served their country in Iraq. The soldiers are being held, I guess is the way to put it, in training barracks, which might be fine for training, but it's really not okay for sick soldiers. They're one-room cement barracks with no air conditioning, 60 to a room. They walk through the dirt to some pretty, frankly, disgusting restroom facilities. But even worse than that, I mean, that's what I saw at Fort Stewart. I think even more troubling was what I heard. And that was that soldiers, and we're talking about National Guard and Army Reserve soldiers, don't seem to be getting access to medical care. And I think this was their main complaint. And there were soldiers there that had been waiting weeks, months to get proper treatment.
And your report says here, and I'm reading from it, it says that no doctor's appointments were going to be available from October 14th to November 11th, Veterans Day. Is that accurate?
It certainly does seem to be a notice to at least one Army Reserve soldier who was trying to get an appointment. I have to say that in a dozen interviews of troops down there, they all did say that they're having extreme difficulty getting access. To give you an idea, the week before I got to Fort Stewart, for the 585 soldiers that were there that week, they told me there was one doctor available to see them, and that's just not enough, they would say.
It's unacceptable. How badly is this impacting morale?
Well, at least among the soldiers that I talked to, morale was a very, very serious problem. I think one of the most upsetting things that I saw was when I talked to soldiers who have been in the Army Reserves for 10, 20, 25 years. who say they haven't been treated quite like this. And some of them said this was it. They wouldn't serve their country again, and which is too bad, because frankly some of them, these are Army Reserve soldiers, National Guard soldiers, as I said, but I mean the bullets in Iraq don't make any distinction between regular troops and Army Reserves.
Exactly. And Mark, your story's obviously gotten a lot of attention. It's been posted on the Drudge Report. Now there are reports today that the Pentagon's actually going to dispatch investigators to go down to Fort Stewart and other reservist bases to see just how bad it is. I want to ask you, though, do you have any information on how your story has actually changed things?
Well, the Pentagon did call me before I came over to the studios today, and the director of the Army staff, General Lovelace, has had a series of meetings over the weekend since my story broke. They've met with healthcare officials, the Army Surgeon General, to try to figure out what, if anything, needs to be done. And it does seem like they are moving. They are sending this team down, this assessment team, to figure out what's going on. They say they're going to start rotating more doctors into Fort Stewart. I hope that doesn't hurt soldiers anywhere else. So they do seem to be moving, and they do seem to be saying that they know there's a problem. So I hope that the story helps our American heroes get what they deserve.
I'm sure it will, Mark. If you will, stay with us. We're going to bring in two other guests right now. We're going to bring in Georgia Congressman Jack Kingston, and we're also going to have Todd Weiler, who served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army under Bill Clinton. Let me begin with you, Jack Kingston. This is in your state. Tell me, are you disturbed by the revelations in this UPI report?
Joe, I certainly am disturbed. Anytime you hear that our soldiers are not being treated right, then you get into action. Now, I have two of my employees who went down there today who toured these facilities, and we have concern about them. And I want to say broadly, whether you're in the reserves or a National Guardsman or whatever, it's an army of one, so all soldiers need to be treated equally, and they need to be treated well. Number two, the Army Surgeon General has already gone down there and is doing an assessment. And then number three, what we have been doing over the last 3 to 4 years is putting in a lot of money for new barracks, new facilities for Tuttle and Wynn Hospital, which are on Fort Stewart Hunter, trying to get them to catch up from the 9 or 10 years of neglect which they had during the 90s.
Well, Jack, you know, though, in this article, which I'm sure you've read the article itself, they had one reservist who said it's not an army of one, it's an army of two, and reservists, National Guardsmen are being treated like second-class citizens. Haven't you found that to be the case in your years in Congress? Because I know it was a lot harder for me to get appropriations for reservists than it was for active-duty military men and women.
Joe, there's no question about it that has been the philosophical case, but I think in the last 2 years that has changed tremendously. Just last week, as you know, we addressed the age-old current receipts, the concurrent receipts issues, and we included guardsmen and reservists in that, and that was unprecedented, and that happened, of course, under the Bush administration. I want to say this, though, in terms of some of these barracks, which I have toured, and Fort Stewart, I'm proud to say, is in my district, we've had 18,000 active-duty soldiers deploy out of there, and then another 15,000 reservists who have been processed through there, and what we have is a capacity problem. When the active duty soldiers came back, a lot of the reservists were pushed into these barracks, which were really designed for summer camp for 2 weeks at a time, weekend duty, and so forth. And that's what the problem is. I do want to report, though, that 2 of those facilities are air-conditioned, which is very important in South Georgia. Another one is not. But the soldiers who were wounded in Iraq are getting medical treatment and are getting appointments. I want to say that...
okay, well, hold on, Jack. I've got to bring in Todd Weiler. We'll get back to you. I also want to talk to our reporter in a second. But Todd Weiler, you've read the report. You've heard about the problems. What do you think the cause of this scandalous treatment of some of our soldiers is a result of?
Well, let me first say I think it's unreasonable to save money on the backs of reservists and guardsmen and their families and their employers. The problem really is that we spend a lot of money getting the right forces to go to an operation, and we spend a lot of money in the conduct of those operations, but we don't put the resources in terms of money and in terms of the smart minds sitting down to figure out how we bring these soldiers home quickly, how we get them the medical attention they have earned, and get them back to their loved ones and back to their jobs.
Secretary, I want you to listen to Bill Clinton in his State of the Union address in 1996. And in 1996, Bill Clinton bragged about getting rid of federal workers. Take a listen.
Today, the federal workforce is 200,000 employees smaller than it was the day I took office as president. Our federal government today is the smallest it has been in 30 years, and it's getting smaller every day.
Secretary Weiler, first of all, let me tell everybody up front, I'm not just going after Bill Clinton on this, because the drawdown started with the first Bush administration. And as I said at the top of the show, when the most recent Bush administration came in, they also talked about having a lean, mean fighting machine. But Secretary Weiler, when that happens, when we cut 200,000 active duty men and women from our armed forces, it's the reservists who are going to have to do more, but our government doesn't want to pay that bill, do they?
Well, first, let me, in fairness to the first Bush administration and certainly the Clinton administration, we're in a post-Cold War environment where we were trying to figure out exactly how we would be dealing with this new environment and after the Soviet Union collapse. Really what we're dealing with right now is we've figured out how we want to use reserve and guardsmen. Now we have to invest the money so that when we bring them home, we're getting them back to their families and their loved ones. I think it has less to do with poor prior planning 10 years ago and more to do with the need for the right investments now.
Congressman Jack Kingston, Congressman Jack Kingston, let me bring you in on that. It's a very good point. George Bush 1, Bill Clinton, they both said the Cold War's over. Let's cut troop size 200,000 troops. Well, now that we're in a new war on terror, isn't it time we invest the money to get some of those people back, or at least take care of our reservists?
Well, I think it is, and that's why the president has passed, in the 3 years he's been in office, the largest pay raises that the Army or the Reserve active or our reservists have received. It's 6%, 4%, and 4%, which is significantly higher than it was in the previous administration. Also has increased separation duty pay and also imminent danger pay and reduced out-of-pocket housing expenses. And all these things are very important, Jack, for quality of life.
Okay, then why is the quality of life still so poor at Fort Stewart? And I know I could go to bases in my district, reservist bases. How long is it going to take for this money to get on the ground and make sure our reservists are getting the type of health care and living standards that they deserve?
Well, Joe, I want to invite you to come down to Fort Stewart because they have done a remarkable job. We have spent over $250 million in military construction money, mostly for barracks and quality of life related, like physical fitness centers and hospitals. In fact, if you go down there, it's ironic that the general headquarters, where the general who deployed all the troops to Iraq, that's an old World War II building, and that's not being touched right now. All the military construction money is going for quality of life, so we're doing a great catch-up job on it. But I want to say another thing. It's so critical that regardless of where you are in terms of your duty, that you get access to medical facilities. And that's one of the things that the Army Surgeon General's office is working on right now because of this report, and I think they are addressing it.
All right. Well, Jack Kingston, I certainly hope so. I want to thank you. Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for coming on. And Mark Benjamin, thank you. And stay on this story. Scarborough Country is going to be calling you up later this week. And we may just take Congressman Kingston up on his offer and visit Fort Stewart. And coming up next on Scarborough Country, much